Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And I'm your host, Ronald Bethea. And you know, if you join us on a regular basis, I'm your host. And today's date is July the 16th, 2025. And we're all blessed to be alive. Ladies and gentlemen, if you join us on a regular basis, you know that the slogan for this show, if there's power in numbers, then the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC captures that power for your financial benefit. The Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC serves as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African American renewable energy companies, both large and small, along with increasing market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also, to educate utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African American community about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't have a scheduled guest uh, for our show today, but we have a very important show for you today. And if many of you who've been following what's been going on in the news around the issue of renewable energy, you know that in the passing of what I refer to as the big brutal bill by the GOP and signed into law by your president, they have in fact declared war on the wind and solar industry in this country by attacking the incentives for renewable energy tax credits in the industry. To set the stage, this was a recent release that was just put out by on July the 15th in Evergreen Action by the Miss Set Nelson to interested parties. And we thought we would lead off today our show with this. The Trump is set to descend on Pittsburgh to speak at a Pennsylvania Senator Dave McCormick's inaugural AI Energy Summit. There, he'll likely celebrate a rapid growth of power hungry data centers just days after signing the most catastrophic bill for the grid, the climate, and clean energy in a generation. The consequences will fall hardest on working class families, skyrocketing utility bills, higher gas prices, and more pollution, and a wave of destructive policies making everyday life more expensive. Even before Trump's big oil billionaire reached his desk, mega Republicans were already boasting about a deal they struck to support for the final passage in exchange for the promise to cut the remains of the clean energy tax credits before they were phased out. Before we're going, look like we're going to get 90+% of all clean energy projects terminated. Texas Republican Chip Roy told Politico, not even bothering to pretend Trump didn't just pledge to crash a thriving American industry. Days later, Trump delivered on his promise, unleashing an executive action to further sabotage sectors responsible for a vast majority of new power added last year as it relates to the solar and wind industry. When it takes to the stage today, expect Trump to champion American AI infrastructure development while actively undermining clean, homegrown power we need to support. And expect him to tout his energy record, even as it directly contradicts and repeats campaign pledges to cut electric bill costs in half. We've been tackling many ways the Trump agenda is hacking costs for working class Americans, selling them out to benefit oligarchs with who are ultra wealthy. Since our last update, he's escalated his assault on clean power and working class families alike, making it harder and more expensive to power homes, drive to work, and keep the lights on. He's a breakdown of new actions that Trump has taken since then and how it's hitting Americans in the wallets. Now, this goes on, this specific article, you'll be able to find it under our news and events tab at positivechangepc.com. That's positivechangepc.com. And it talks about a number. Trump escalates trade war with huge tariffs on U.S. allies. Trump's ratcheted up a nonsensical trade war with the largest trading partners, announcing plans to impose 30% tariffs on imports from Mexico and the European Union, along sending a similar tariffs to 23 other major trading partners, including Canada, Japan, and Brazil. The impacts of trade war will be aimed at our allies, but it lands squarely on the backs of the working class Americans. Now, Trump set to obstruct massive grain belt express transportation issues. Trump's liquefied natural gas exports expansion set to drive up U.S. gas prices even higher. Imports. Now, what's important to know about that, ladies and gentlemen, is that if you believe that the tariff on copper we're going to make it 50%, copper is essential for electric vehicles, EV batteries, transmission lines, and other renewable energy infrastructure. These tariffs will spike costs for raw materials needed to expand affordable clean energy and manufacturing of EVs. The tariffs will also increase the cost of manufacturing gas-powered cars in America, as copper is a crucial component of their production. This comes on the heels of Trump's earlier pledge to slap a 25% tariff on imported vehicles, claiming it will make people sort of buy American cars. Now, the next headline features Trump signs executive order to restrict access to the remaining clean tax credits. Now, we're going to take a deep dive, ladies and gentlemen, into just that here. And I want to sort of set the stage before we take this deep dive into what's going on as it relates to the Trump administration and look at the attack on the solar and wind industry. Now, looking at the solar industry and looking at a recent study that was done, an analysis of actual household payments throughout utilities across 97 U.S. zip codes. Now, this particular study was done by Insight US Utilities Market. The size of the household spent reported cost in 2024 for electricity, which Americans we spent, was $451 billion for electricity alone. And in 2024, the U.S. solar power industry accounted for 66% of all new electricity generated capacity added in the U.S. in 2024. 600 gigawatts of solar power in 2024. This represents a substantial 33% increase from 2023. Now, United States in 2024 solar industry had a landmark year, installing 50 gigawatts of DC capacity, a 21% increase from 2023. 66% of all new electricity generating capacity was added to the grid. Revenues that were generated from solar valued approximately $204 billion. This is how much the solar industry and what was done in 2024. Rooftop solar, residential solar, was $6.3 billion in 2024, which was added into the marketplace to reduce the cost of electricity for American residents. Nationwide. I wanted to set the stage before we talk about what this legislation means. Now, Trump has basically introduced an executive order, which in fact this executive order is very, very disturbing, ladies and gentlemen. We're looking at, for electric vehicles, the deadline for the $7,500 tax credit for new EVs have been pushed back from December 31st of 25 to September the 30th of 2025. For used EVs, there's a $4,000 credit. That has also been pushed back to September the 30th, 2025. Now, we know what today's date is. Today is July the 16th, 2025. It makes a tremendous difference in a quarter of a year to give more people an opportunity who may be interested in purchasing a new electric vehicle to take advantage of these credits in the marketplace. What's even more disturbing, ladies and gentlemen, is that Trump, by the so-called authority invested in the president by the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America, is hereby ordered. Section 1, purpose. For those long, the federal government has forced American taxpayers to subsidize inexpensive and unreliable energy sources like wind and solar. Well, I argue the difference with the data that I just given to you. Now, this order is titled Ending Market distortion subsidies for unreliable foreign controlled energy resources. Let me first, ladies and gentlemen, give you what the word marketing distorting subsidies are as it relates to the fossil fuel industry. Direct financial support and tax breaks and subsidies for the fossil fuel industry in 2024 was 760 billion. Subsidies alone were 52 billion. You have tax deductions and exemptions, direct funding, expensing of intangible costs, which is called CDIs, which relates to the drilling costs of drilling new wells. You have percentage deletion allowances, master limit partnerships to avoid corporate taxpayers by taxing the stockholders. So the corporate entities, the oil companies, pay little or no income tax. The amortization of the geographic expenditures. There's also benefits for carbon capture. These are all subsidies to the fossil fuel industry, gas, coal, and oil industry. But yet you're going to say that solar, which in 2023 accounted for 60% of all new energy added to the U.S. grid, 66% of all new electricity capacity came from solar energy, but it's not reliable. So to stop this, you want to put these type of draconian executive orders in place. Now, the proliferation of these projects displaces reliable, dispatchable domestic energy resources, compromises our electric grid, and disintegrates the beauty of our natural resources landscape. Well, what more than fracking and oil drilling does more than to the environment than wind turbines and solar panels? I mean, you can try. I can't even make this up, ladies and gentlemen. Moreover, resilience on so-called green subsidies strengthen national security by making the United States more dependent on supply chains controlled by foreign adversaries, ending a massive cost and taxpayer handouts to unreliable energy sources is vital to energy dominance, national security, and economic growth and physical health for the nation. Well, that couldn't be farther from the truth. Let's take a deep dive, ladies and gentlemen, into what this is going to do. Rapid elimination of market distortions and costs for taxpayers by which he called the so-called green energy subsidies. Now, this is what is important in this conversation. Tax credits and by the big brutal bill. The Bill Act implementation by the Department of Treasury. Number one, within 45 days following the enactment of the Big Brutal Bill Act, the Secretary of Treasury shall take all action as the Secretary of Treasury deems necessary and appropriate to strictly enforce the determination of clean energy production and investment credits under 45Y and 48E of the Internal Revenue Code for wind and solar. This includes issuing new and revised guides as the Secretary deems appropriate and consistent with applicable law to ensure policies concerning the beginning of the constructions are not circumvented, including by preventing articles, accelerated manipulation of eligibility by restrictions by the use of broad safe harbors unless a substantial portion of subject facility has already been built. Within 45 days following the enactment of the big brutal bill, the Secretary of Treasury will take prompt action as the Secretary of Treasury deems appropriate, consistent with the appropriate laws to implement enhanced foreign entity and concern restrictions on one from the big brutal bill. Ladies and gentlemen, this is all here and it's signed by, I refer to this person as COVID 45 plus 2 with 34 felony counts coming straight at you. You know him as Donald Trump, your president. I am absolutely livid, being that I serve as the chairman of the board of directors for the National Association of Blacks in Solar, and my organization, the Positive Change Purchasing Cooperative LLC, which we serve as an economic blueprint for renewable energy companies, both large and small, with increasing market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically Black colleges and universities, to utilize Black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African American men and women, locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Now, speaking of that, ladies and gentlemen, when we began to look at the fact that under the Biden and Harris administration, before the African American communities could really get a footing in the solar industry, we had over 13,000 solar installation design firms doing business. We had less than 100 African American firms nationwide in the solar renewable energy business. Less than 35 installation in firms and design firms with boots on the ground. These are the type of disparities and the reason why we do what we do here on this platform, Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. Now, as we begin to look at what is going on as it relates to the impact of the big brutal bill, we're going to look at an article that was just done by Mrs. Marlene Lavelle, Aidan Hughes, Amy Green, Arcella Martin, Dan Garcine, Georgina Guston, Jake Boston, and Wyatt McCosh. This was dated July the 3rd, 2025. And it refers to, I don't use that word, the big, I said brutal bills set to slash through the U.S. climate and justice drive. Trump legislation will hurt the clean energy, boost fossil fuels, and end investment in environmental justice. Climate advocates now vow to continue the fight. In this specific article, ladies and gentlemen, it goes on to say, in the end, President Trump's giant tax and spending plan rocketed past both fiscal hawks and social moderates in the House with no changes on Thursday. The $3 trillion One Big Brutal Bill Act is now ready to reach across to the U.S. economy, slicing into every aspect of national efforts to address climate change and environmental injustice. Can we say the floods in Texas? The 87 page legislation largely increases landmark investments in increases the landmark investments in clean energy jobs in communities that the Democrats-led Congress had made 3 years ago in the Inflation Reduction Act. It stomped out incentives for purchasing electric vehicles and efficient appliances. It puts out tax credits for wind and solar energy. It opens up federal lands and waters for oil and gas drilling and increase its profitability while creating new federal support for coal. It ends an historic investment in poor and minority communities that bear a disproportionate pollution burden, money that the Trump administration was already refusing to spend. It wipes out any spending on green projects for the federal government. Now, President Joe Biden left his office expressing confidence that his climate legacy was secure because of $132 billion in private investment in clean energy manufacturing, which be spurred by programs ongoing to Republican districts and states. Let's drill down on how President Biden and the Dem was incorrect. And let's look at what he was attempting to do. I understand the thinking, being that he had the first African American woman, Vice President Kamala Harris, as the vice president who ran and successfully won the popular vote. And I'm not afraid to say, because of the documentation by Greg Palast in looking at what a documentary that they produced about what happened with over 3 million mail-in ballots, I would say that the election was stolen. But let's look at the realities of the $132 billion in private investment. Now, this goes right into Clean Energy Works. And Clean Energy Works gives you a clear breakdown of what's what. And we're going to take another deep dive into this. Clean Energy Works, you can go to small e number 2 after number 2.org, and you'll be able to go directly to the website. It takes tracking new clean energy projects, expansions, and production announced across America. Now, this map began tracking projects announced by the private sector after the Inflation Reduction Act passed in August of 2022. There's a national map where you can zoom in and look and see where these projects were. They also broke it down in terms of red districts and blue districts. There were a total, ladies and gentlemen, of 397 new projects scheduled in 43 states. 132 billion 744 million $129,000 in foreign investment, which the Biden and Harris administration had bought in investors to in fact, invest in infrastructure to build manufacturing facilities, and this would have created jobs in the United States for everyday Americans. 132,000, 23,174 jobs are on the line with what Trump is doing. Let's take a look in terms of the breakdown by the various congressional districts, party affiliations. For the Republicans, districts, 245 projects, totaling $109,087,629,000 to be invested and creating 88,867 jobs that are now gone. Let me be clear, ladies and gentlemen. The Republicans committed, I said, against the GOP, against the American people, I would call treason, to push out that much investment because the Biden and Harris administration had bought that here, $1.7 trillion to invest in infrastructure in this country. It's a crime. In Democratic districts, 129 projects totaling $20,378,000,000, creating 30,133 jobs. Boom, gone. Undefined districts were 23. $3,278,500,000 in investment, a total of 4,134 jobs. Gone. Let's look at this by state. The 43 states, ladies and gentlemen. Alabama, 10 projects, $2,819,200,000 in investment was slated to go into Alabama to create 1,701 jobs. Alabama's never seen that kind of infrastructure investment since the founding of the United States of America, and none of these other states, blue or red, this is why I said this is an act of economic tyranny as it relates to the American working class and specific low and moderate income communities. Because under Executive Order 14096, it stated that 40%, it created the Justice 40 initiative and stated that 40% of that investment must go to low and moderate income communities across the United States. Didn't say nothing about black folk. It didn't say nothing specifically about white folk, Hispanic folk, Native Americans. It said low and moderate income communities. It said across to the American public. Now, Arkansas, 2 projects, 250 million, 500 jobs gone. Arizona, 13 projects, $6 billion, 775 million, 3,002 jobs gone. Arizona or California, 15 projects, 1 billion, 600 million, 810 jobs gone. Colorado, 6 projects, 230 million, 1,152 jobs gone. Connecticut, 4 projects, 24 billion, 800 million, 100 jobs gone. Florida, 6 projects, 176 million, 450 jobs gone. Georgia, 33 projects, 12 billion, 881 million, 15,098 jobs gone. Iowa, 4 projects, 17 million, 102 jobs gone. Illinois, 9 projects, 2 billion, 714 million, 600,000, 902 jobs gone. Oh, we're gonna keep it going because we're gonna make sure that people understand that this is what has just taken place. Indiana, 13 projects, 8 billion, 679 million, 7,262 jobs gone. Kansas, 3 projects, 110 million, 180 jobs gone. Kentucky, 9 projects, 2,658,900,000 in investment, 2,761 jobs gone. Louisiana, 6 projects, 1,719,500,000, 1,109 jobs gone. Massachusetts, 6 projects, 45 million 700,000, 141 jobs gone. Maryland, 4 projects, 316 million, 370,000, 325 jobs gone. Maine, 1 project, 6 million, 200 jobs gone. Michigan, 34 projects, 12 billion, 514 million, 800,000, 12,149 jobs gone. Minnesota, 4 projects, 155 million, 700 jobs gone. Missouri, 5 projects, 747 million, 691 jobs gone. Mississippi, 4 projects, 2 billion, 55 million, 2,540 jobs gone. North Carolina, 29 projects, 21 billion, 765 million, 259,000, 12,775 jobs gone. North Dakota, 1 project, didn't give a breakdown for investment nor jobs. Nebraska, 1 project, did not supply the information for the investment nor jobs creation. New Hampshire, 1 project, 16,300,000. It did not supply the number of jobs that would be created, what would be lost. New Jersey, it did not provide the investment nor the number of jobs that would be created. New Mexico, 7 projects, 2,185,000,000, 3,442 jobs gone. Nebraska, 7 projects, 6,600,000,000, 5,250 jobs gone. New York, 13 projects, 791,000,000, 1,809 jobs gone. Ohio, 19 projects, 7 billion, 93,300,000, 4,934 jobs gone. Oklahoma, 5 projects, 4,270,000,000, 1,013 and 10 jobs gone. Oregon, 2 projects, 43 million, didn't provide the number of jobs that would be created and what would be lost. Pennsylvania, 4 projects, 126 million, 100,000, 427 jobs gone. Puerto Rico didn't provide the amount of investment, 800 jobs on the line. Rhode Island Avenue, Rhode Island, the state, not the avenue. 1 project didn't provide the amount of investment, nor the number of jobs created. South Carolina, my home state, had never seen this investment kind of money. 32 projects, 14,492,500,000, 14,183 jobs gone. Thanks to Lindsey Graham and Tim Scott and the rest of the crew. I mean, I'm from South Carolina, so I can speak to that. I know. We kind of hurt those people going through down there and what they're living. Tennessee, 25 projects, 5,603,800,000 in investment, 5,604 jobs gone. Texas, 32 projects, 9,311,000,000, 14,102 jobs gone. Utah, 3 projects, 1 billion, didn't provide a breakdown on the number of jobs created. Virginia, 10 projects, 1,255,000,000, 1,305 jobs. Vermont, 1 project, didn't provide the amount of investment, 12 jobs on the line. Wisconsin, 7 projects, 242,462 jobs. And West Virginia, 4 projects, 1,335,850 jobs on the line. Ladies and gentlemen, I just gave you a deep dive on what you really lost by this insanity by the Trump administration, because they decided they'd sell out and jump in bed with the gas, oil, and coal industry. This was not taxpayers' money. This was private investment dollars. But when you take away the tax incentives for these companies and these corporations to invest in the country, they're going to pull that money out. Let's look at what's going on, ladies and gentlemen. If you go to my website on the news and events, you'll be able to find in May of this year an article that speaks just to that. How much doubt and the tariffs have created with uncertainty. Policy uncertainty leads to 1.4 billion canceled in U.S. manufactured investment in May. We're talking about May. This article goes and speaks to just that fact. The United States experienced a surge in industrial production in the past 3 years as a result of the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act. However, that may change as the U.S. Senate prepares to vote on massive tax and spending bill that would increase taxes on clean energy factories and projects, according to a report by E2, bipartisan group that tracks the clean energy economics in the Clean Energy Works report. I just read from the E2 report, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I'm saying. We've been beating the drum around this. Solar manufacturers alone account for announcements of investments of 45.8 billion, according to the Solar Industry Trade Association, SEIA, since the federal manufacturing policies were enacted in 22. SEIA reported that 9.1 billion of these manufacturing facilities are operational, 15.6 billion are under active construction, and other 21.1 billion manufacturing investments are under development. This is what's on the line. In May alone, 1.4 billion in new factories and clean energy projects were canceled or jeopardy of being canceled, according to the latest monthly analysis of the clean energy projects tracked by E2 and the Clean Economy Tracker. Among the recent factories canceled, the REC Ceylon, Core Power, and Myersberger. E2 reported that the projects canceled in May was expected to create 1,000 new jobs. An additional 600 workers were laid off across 5 closures announced in May. In the first 5 months of 2025, E2 reported that the cancellations would include solar molecules as well as battery and electric EV facilities, totaling 15 billion in investment, and were expected to create 12,000 new jobs. Federal legislation in 22 extended the F45X advanced manufacturing credits through 2034. That's what I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen. This was on the books until 2034, and these folks, in 2025, it had 9 years of lifespan left in the legislation. People, we need to wake up. We need to wake up, especially those African American politicians who ain't talking about nothing but Medicaid, Medicare, and SNAP. I understand that. I'm a baby boomer, and I need all that to survive, and my peers do. But my grandson and my daughters and younger people out here in the marketplace, they need the green economy, and they needed these opportunities, especially in these red states where you have the largest percentage of African American population based in the US. This is a fact, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not making any of this up. And for us to sit around and stand around like this ain't real, it's this is real as it gets, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I've been beating the drum since 2016 around the renewable energy sector, and even inside when these policies were on the books by the Biden-Harris administration about the lack of grant opportunities, the lack of funding that was reaching the African American community specifically around these issues. And people will say to me, well, is your show getting any traction? Well, hell, if you listen, it'll get some traction, and pass the word and subscribe to our network. This is serious business, ladies and gentlemen, and we're serious about what we do here at on this platform of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Now, remember, I've served in the last 5 years as the president of the head of the National Association of Blacks in Solar, which is a 501c3 organization. We have been advocating to increase market share for African and African American renewable energy companies to address the high energy costs at our historically black colleges and universities to utilize black-owned farmlands and HBCU campuses to develop capacity and initiatives for renewable energy projects to bring down the underemployment of young African and African American men and women locally, nationally, and throughout the diaspora. Also to educate the African and African American locally and nationally about the economic impacts of climate change and the need for environmental education through Black Talk radio programs such as the one you're listening to, Solar Now and the Future, with its economic impact on Black America. We don't know how to make it plainer. We listen to Lottie, Dottie, and everybody, and nobody's making it plain about what's actually happening in the marketplace. Let's break down the two so-called gorillas in the room. Giant gorillas. Let's talk about AI, artificial intelligence. Let's talk about crypto mining. Now, none of that's possible without the construction of data centers. If you go to our news and events tab, you'll be able to stroll down and you'll be able to find a webinar about the corporations that are involved in financing the building of data centers worldwide. Their target is to build approximately 8,000 data centers. They have, as the gentleman said in the webinar, it took place in Dubai, in Saudi Arabia. Bloomberg Corporation was one of the hosts of this thing. We got everything we need. We got everything except the power and the water. Let me repeat myself. The gentleman said, we got everything we need. We got the money, we got the land, we got everything but the power and the water. Now, who pays for the power? And what type of power is being used? Well, that's how the deal got cut with the fossil fuel industry. They're using natural gas. They're buying up coal power plants that have been retired and retrofitting these power plants with gas turbine technology, but they're not putting any caps on the stacks on these manufacturing facilities. So what's escaping into the air? You'll be able to find an article that talks about some new data centers that have been built in upper New York State. They've been built all over the U.S. We talk about this. There's also an article on my website that talks about what's going on in the what we call the PJM region and how the game gets played. Now, the PJM is the regulatory entity that controls what type of energy can be used in market demographics. The price of that energy will be coal, natural gas, nuclear, hydronetics, wind, and solar. The PJM region is composed, it starts with Virginia, state of Virginia, District of Columbia, state of Maryland, state of Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey, New York, Ohio, and Illinois. Exelon Corporation is Godzilla. They control all of those subsidiaries like BG&E, Pepco, and other subsidiary utility entities that come under their umbrella. They are, in fact, they're in fact the controlling entities in the industry. Now, I have come to the end of this show. You have 1,000 members who are part of the PJM, and they're basically those stakeholders. They are the ones who control how many renewable energy projects that have already been built that would actually be uplinked and the power goes to the grid. Well, this scenario is you had 3,000 projects in the queue over the last 4 years. Only one got uplinked. So that should tell you something. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in some serious trouble in this country. And if you don't know how to read your utility bill, you'll find out that we're paying for this every time we pay our gas, water, and electric bills. This expenditure for these data centers are being passed right on to us. You will find an article called the Watchdog Group, which is our Office of the People's Counsel for the state of Maryland, where they the head of the legal counsel for the Office of the People's Counsel for the state of Maryland has partnered with New Jersey and several other states, and they filed a lawsuit concerning data centers that's being in Virginia. But we just got settled with an $800 million rate increase that went into effect June 1 of 2025. So we're paying for this, ladies and gentlemen, these data centers. And Trump them out here talking this, what they're talking, but it's smoke and mirrors. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I've come to the close of another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we need your support to support this platform. We are not the greedy, but we are definitely the needy. And we need your support and your help to keep this platform moving forward and to improve on our platform. So with that being said, if you go to our website at positivechangepc.com, you want to click on our news and events tab, you'll be able to find a link that says donate. And as I've said, we're not the greedy, we're definitely the needy here, here on this platform. So whatever you can donate to this cause, we would greatly appreciate it. And with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we don't want you to be this here next week. We want you to meet us back here as we close another exciting edition of Solar Now and the Future with its economic impact on Black America. And until next week, we say go in peace. You got it, Brother Hill. What's happening? Well, this is the deal, man. You know he's in summer school, right? Okay, he's supposed to get out by 12. So I don't. He supposed. And he should have told you that. Now my daughter is talking about because her aunt, she's Jackie. She's in Ohio. She lives in Richmond. She fell and broke her hip, so she's talking about pulling him for a couple of days and going down there. But he's in the program, so I talked to her the other day, man. I'm gonna try to get him because at least he can. He should be man enough. He's 12 years old to come and say, Mr. Hill, I'm in summer school and this is what time I should get him. So I'm gonna talk to him about this. Yeah. Well, that's what's happening, bro. He's in summer school, but I don't know. He should have been out by now. But he should let you know what's going on with him. So I'm gonna talk to him about that. All right, brother. Bro, I understand, and I'm gonna stay out of it, but I'm gonna stay on him so he will call you and tell you, talk to you directly. All right, bro. All right, bro. Thank you. All right, bye bye.